There have been some changes, and that's why it's particularly fitting that I'm talking about the book Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely today. I read it in 2010. It was the last book I read in 2010, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I wrote this about it in November of that year. A lightning fast read. I thought this book was great. Some of the cases were profoundly interesting, and others seemed to bolster what most of us think of as common sense. I found it strange that the book was filed under business. In fact, I searched through many different nonfiction sections before breaking down and asking for help. You shouldn't shy away because of this classification, though. While some of the chapters have new and great logic-defying business applications, the book can be enjoyed for its observations in psychology, sociology, philosophy, and even some lifestyle choices that could prop it up in the self-help aisle. Some of the random asides can feel clumsy at times, and I don't agree with all the conclusions drawn by the experiments, but they all piqued my interest and were unique enough for a layman observer like me to care about the seemingly daunting euphemism, behavioral economics. I love this book, and I love this kind of nonfiction too, where it is kind of poking at stuff that we may see in everyday life and sort of going deeply into it and kind of trying to explain the why things happen, and especially when things happen that we don't expect to happen. That's that predictably irrational thing that Ariely is talking about there. I loved it. I thought there's a lot of great things in here that talk about, from the business perspective, the reason why it comes up in business is the idea of the way to sort of promote and market ideas in a way that's going to be more effective, and that sometimes audiences behave irrationally. And this, Dan Ariely gives some of the ideas through these experiments how to predict that irrationality and live with it. It's interesting too that I read this in 2010 because I started my MBA program the following year here. And I think at this point I was still working in the news. I was still not really connected to anything in business. So it's interesting that this kind of thing was still interesting to me before I even got to the point of thinking about going to graduate school and those sort of things. So this might have been part of the seeds that led to taking that step later the next year in 2011. But we'll talk about that in the history of books when we get there. And then there's a long section too coming up where it's going to be a whole bunch of business books, which a lot of people may find really boring, but I reviewed those too. So anyway, this is the end of 2010. Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Till next.